You're watching the Reddit Ranger. On today's episode, OP goes on a desperate journey to save a friend. Okay, now surprisingly, this one I'm actually not reading directly from Reddit. This is the newest updated draft from the author, A Lady of Elks 20. The story is called The Unbroken Future.
I should have seen this coming,
Lady Morgana Oakthorn thought to herself as she raced her way through the woods near her home village. She was carried by a celestial steed, taking the familiar form of a stag, shimmering and lavender. She had borne the strain for too long. It is not surprising she would do something this desperate. Maybe not involving the girls, but still, Morgan's thoughts tormented her. She was on the trail of a friend, Kezia, a cleric of Mistral, divination wizard, and a repository of a large amount of god energy known to them as Shatter. Kezia had grown despondent from the loss of her dear friends. Like the monk chef Charbon, and all the terrible struggle fighting on the hidden continent had wrought. She had seen countless dead-end futures where all in the expedition perish, or incomplete and mad gods return unchecked, or worst of all, reality fades to dust. 3 days ago, Kezia had disappeared. Morgan had been asked to assist by her patron and relentless paramour, Ceranos. Ceranos was a fae with very little loyalty save to their family. Their grandfather helped watch over broken girls, those who had been cursed with prophecy and madness by the shattering of the fae and aberrant gods. So when the broken were abducted by a powerful wizard, Ceranos was called in to clean up his family's mess. Morgan was roped into the errand, though she could put 2 and 2 together, and figured out Kezia's role in this caper, and so the paladin had her own stake in this mission. She would not risk other members of the expedition on this journey. They were too important, and depending on the folks going, may end up doing something far riskier than even her plan to stop Kezia. Morgan had absorbed some shatter, hoping to use the energy to slay or stop the berserk remains of the god Hearn the Hunter. These days, Hearn had some level of sanity returned to him, and Morgan was becoming more sure that the promise of devotion to the god that she made would one day be kept. The amount of the unstable power she absorbed was far less than Kezia's, to be sure. Kezia had tried and succeeded almost every time to absorb shatter. It granted her powerful visions, but also traumatized her. Morgan hoped that she could wrest the shatter away from Kezia with Ceranos' help, and the two of them could hold it safely until they are able to relinquish it to Lady Silverkin and the expedition's scientists. Barring that, Morgan would defeat her friend without killing her and lead the broken girls to the village and await their caretaker's pickup. Morgan realized all too late where Kezia was taking the girls. It was a place she had lived most of her life and only recently returned to. Near her childhood village, a wound in the world existed. In the wound, there was a portal to the hidden continent, the back room of reality where even gods should not tread. Ceranos had been lured there by a call of loyalty which tied their fae lineage to the remains of Hecate, now known as the White Queen. Disoriented from the journey, Ceranos was attacked by Hearn, known then as the Red King, and left for dead. Morgan arrived in her allies' time of need and, along with her friends in the expedition, rescued the fae. In exchange, she formed a pact with the Shape-Changer, exchanging pieces of their souls. The wound in the world remained, one of the few places you could get to the continent without the strange devices the expedition had. It was extremely dangerous to do so, however, so Morgana urged her steed on, hoping they were not too late. Kezia sat in the clearing, broken girls all around her. Transfixing them on her was easy enough. She simply let the energy within her shine through, and like moths to the flame, they followed her. The metaphor was too apt, as the energy within burned her and threatened all their lives. She had seen countless futures where that very happening occurred, but it was worth the risk. She had seen a way to fix things, really fix things. It came to her one day when the future grew too loud, too fractured. It was happening more and more. She was doing a reading for a townsperson, helping them with financial advice, the usual these days. In her clouded seer's vision, she saw a bright light and a hand reaching out. All around her, the futures that kept her from sleep loomed. Her friends, dead, The world broken, reality left to wither and die. So many ways, so many little deaths. She feared those more. Rowan the Bard, finally brought to heel for all their schemes and half-baked plans. Agatha the Warlock, consumed by the dark force that haunted at the edges of her life. Cogsworth the Wizard and Scholar, trapped in the cultist's maddening grip forever. Morgan, a young and headstrong paladin, brought low, trying to save these friends from their fates, struggling like a reckless fly in the web of fate that entwined them all, that doomed them. But this hand, it promised a way out. It told her how to find the perfect future, to make it so. She had the power. She needed only to complete the tasks it described. It had taken months for her resolve to crack. But as her horrific visions intensified and as some came to pass, her resistance to the idea wavered, like Charbon. Oh, Charbon. That one broke her. So she lured their guardians away, and stole the broken girls like she was asked to. She brought them to a place rich with the energies of the broken gods and the secret world that was their tomb, and she waited. Morgan broke through the trees, willing Cernunnos through their bond to be ready. Kezia was sitting on a stump, with the girls all around her, like she was a teacher, taking her students on a field trip. She seemed to be expecting Morgan.
Just like you to come alone, Lady Morgan. Still trying to sacrifice yourself rather than ask for help, I see.
Kezia's words stung. Morgan had been more reckless before settling her affairs with her past, more daring, more foolish. The very sword she reached for, a dream of spring, was a gift from an ally who didn't want her to die fighting Hearn without half a chance. But she was different now. Sure, this plan was a bit reckless, but so was whatever Kezia had planned for. For her to burn this many bridges? To what end? And why now? Her reply was full of defiant love.
I didn't think I needed to bring an adventuring party to have a chat with a wayward friend. Was I wrong?
At that, Kezia looked directly at Morgan. Eyes clouded, but tinged with a deep sadness.
You are the only one this course of action cannot save, Morgan. I begged, I pleaded to find a way for the hand to save you too, but it is set in stone. You attempt to intervene, you perish. Every future says the same.
Morgan knew, unstable or not, Kezia wouldn't lie about her vision. She never did. Kept it to herself, maybe, but never lied.
Do we have to fight, Kezia? Come back with me. They'll forgive you for taking the girls. We could even say this was good for them. Everyone is probably worried about you by now. We need our friend. We're almost at the end.
Morgan regretted her choice of words immediately as Kezia snapped back.
Almost at the end indeed. Death stalks around every choice we make now, and you still think we will come out unscathed? To change the past? To fix the future? I do not see that now. This is the only way!
At that moment, a terrible shockwave of power erupted behind Kezia. The faint wound in the world, entrance to the hidden continent, ruptured. Invisible sutures gave way to a gaping maw, from which a massive hand emerged. It was sinewy and pale. Morgan could not place what it was at first, but the sickening aura it gave off was familiar. This was a piece of an aberrant god, a very incomplete one, but still, the girls all wailed and fell to the forest floor. Kezia herself was shocked, but soon fell into an unfamiliar pose. A voice that was not Kezia's spoke through her.
So much power trapped in this frail seer. This will make us more than whole. We can consume them all with this.
The possessed Kezia looked at Morgan.
You too bear some of their power, those hateful fae. A lovely start before my glorious return.
The possessed wizard lunged at her, and the struggle began. Within minutes, Morgan was at her limit. Kezia was a powerful spellcaster in her own right, but Morgan's abilities lent themselves well for thwarting casters. She could resist most magical compulsions, suffered less harm from magical attacks, all via the warding magic of ancients her oath conferred. But this creature seemed to both alter and amplify Kezia's abilities. Morgan seemed to have an impossible run of bad luck, losing her shield, failing to resist the illusions it sowed, and it wore her down with blasts of eldritch energy. Cyrano spoke in her mind, asking if she needed assistance, the Fae reluctant but bound by pact. She waved them off, instead taking the space between moments to reconsider her strategy. This wasn't the 2 versus 1 she envisioned, but perhaps it could still be the one that favored her end. Morgan settled into a more agile stance, holding a Dream of Spring in both hands, blade a golden divide across her chest. The aberrant hand swung at her and she blinked out of existence, settling right next to Kezia. She dropped her blade and grabbed the wizard, surprising the entity in control of her body.
Kezia, I know you're in there. I know you cannot see anything but doom, but look into my mind. See the future through my eyes.
Morgan summoned all her remaining divine energy, using the laying on of hands as a conduit to link their souls. A desperate plea to a beloved friend. All went black. Morgan was falling. Kezia stirred within her body. She reached out to meet Morgan's plea and called forth her gift through Morgan. The shadows that loomed began to vanish and were replaced with a kind of green. Kezia stood in a familiar field, the large grounds of Silverkin Manor. A teenage tiefling, pale and lithe, led a much younger silver dragonborn on a merry chase. The dragonborn's head scales shimmered with slight flecks of the colors shining through. In the distance, she smelled delicious food and heard Rowan singing and dancing with a large, familiar chorus answering the bard's verses. She reached out with her divination to look further. Sitting in a lecture hall of the invisible college, she spied a slightly grayer Cogsworth. He was giving an impassioned lecture on the importance of field work, while Quasar and a few others she recognized took eager notes. Cogsworth seemed to have a spark within him she'd not seen in quite some time. Her far sight fading, she turned to see her companion at the table, a beautiful and tall dragonborn, dressed shimmering to match her brilliant silver scales. Lady Silverkin smiled.
Idyllic, isn't it? It took so long to get here, but we did it. I regret how hard things were on all of you, but we did what we had to do. We worked tirelessly to sow the seeds for the future. Now we reap the unbroken world saved by our labors. Isn't that right, Kezia?
Kezia felt a warmth in her chest, something long since faded from countless struggles, setbacks, and losses on the continent. She felt hope. Faint, fragile, but alive. The last piece of her vision was not surprising. She saw into a grove on the grounds. Flowers of all colors and varieties grew, encircled by strong yew trees. Coming into their full height at last, a sword was stabbed into the ground, golden vines creeping up and down the powerful blade. A small tablet was before her. It read, "Hope is an endless journey with countless destinations. May any hero who needs it make use of this hope left for them here. In memory, Lady Morgana Oakthorn." Kezia reached for the blade and came roaring back to reality. Morgan was fading. She realized it then. She hoped Kezia could handle the rest. She shared the one future she knew for certain, but it had cost her all her remaining energy. She apologized to a terrified Cyrano's and began to let her consciousness fade. Then she was awake with a start. Strength flowed into her weary form. Kezia stood above her, eyes wet with tears but unclouded.
You have to survive, Morgan. You get to live in that future, too.
Morgan stood and retrieved her sword. The hand screamed a terrible wail, and the aura of ill fate flared, distorting the air and the aberrant hate and frustration.
I will consume you both then, and these little morsels too.
Morgan gritted her teeth, but Kezia gave her a slight nod. Morgan dashed at the hand and made a desperate slash down the middle of its form. She had not been able to hit the creature before, either tripping or missing or simply being off balance. But she felt Kezia bending the future to her will, ever so slightly. Morgan's blow landed true, and she willed a powerful divine smite into the strike. The hand split down the middle and began to dissipate as it retreated back into the wound in the world. The wound soon closed, and a large deer roamed out of the woods. It made a strange call, and a ward appeared around the wound, sealing it off. Nodding to Morgan, Serranos retreated to signal their grandfather. Morgan hugged Kezia, crying intensely.
I thought we lost you, Kezia. I didn't know what to do. We need you. I need you.
Kezia returned the hug and smiled.
I still see a lot of things that can go wrong, Morgan, but I think I understand why you fight so hard now. You see that, don't you?
Morgan stopped crying and wiped her nose.
Every single night, I dream of the future. We have to win. We will. I know it.
After some gruff words from the old servant of Hecate, the girls were returned. Kezia and Morgan both returned safely to the Silverkin Manor grounds. Something had changed, though. While Kezia still foresaw doom and gloom, and often made strenuous objections to many of her colleagues' plans, she never fell into total despair again. And in desperate moments, she and Morgan would share a look, then do the impossible. Kezia would bend fate here and there, and Morgan would look certain death in the eye with resolve and a smile. The future remained unwritten, but it was still whole, and they were determined to see it for themselves. That was r/D&D stories. This has been the Reddit Ranger. Now let's see if we can go ahead and crit that like and subscribe.